Valerie, thank you so much for being here today to chat about Shine Theory and where it all started. I'm so grateful for your time.
I am delighted to be here, Leah. Thank you for having me.
So we met, I don't know if you remember.
I remember vividly, yes I do.
Okay, it was 4 years ago, and it was at a lunch that Sheryl Sandberg was hosting at Facebook. There was all women around the table.
Yeah.
That's right. And so we met at that lunch, which was so much fun. Do you remember what you said to me that day?
Of course I remember exactly what I said to you. I said, I should be you. I had this idea 15, 20 years ago, sitting around my kitchen table with one of my best friends, Kelly Dibble, and we were both young working moms. And we said, you know what? We need somebody who could do all this stuff we don't have time to do. Right. And then we started talking, we're like, we could start a company. And then we both went back to
We could call it TaskRabbit.
Well, we didn't get that far, but we sure had the thought. And we literally just, we didn't follow our dreams. Shame on us, and good for you.
Well, I often say I was not the first person to have that idea. It was not a novel idea.
Yeah, but you did it. There's a difference between having an idea and executing, and you executed.
Well, so here we are now 10 years later from when I founded TaskRabbit, 4 years later from that lunch. And here I am. I'm stealing your idea again.
Good, good. Best compliment in the world.
So this time, the concept that we're talking about is called Shine Together, and it was really inspired personally for me from your stories out of the Obama White House.
Oh, that's very kind of you.
It was incredible getting to read about Shine Theory and just kind of see little glimpses of it, but it is my dream to be able to hear the origin story and what the story behind the story was and get to share it with everyone else.
Well, I think start with the perspective that President Obama believes that diversity is a strength, and that what we should do in the White House or in a business or wherever you are is to create a culture where people can thrive. Everybody can thrive. And his theory was you're here for a reason. It's so selective. People, everyone wants to work in the White House, and so we had our choice of the most talented people in the world. And he said to me as co-chair of the transition team, make sure that you surround me with people who are going to bring diversity of ideas and perspectives, and that's going to help me grow and make the best possible decisions. And so part of what I wanted to do is to have what I didn't have early in my career, and that is a community, a sense where we were looking out for each other, we had each other's backs, we actually got to know one another. And one example I can give you is I tried to recruit a brilliant young woman named Cecilia Munoz, and she turned down the job, and she said, I have 2 teenage daughters and I can't possibly work in the White House. And President Obama really wanted her.
Oh, wow.
He said, you go sell it.
Oh my goodness.
And I said, Cecilia, tell me what your reservations are. And she said, well, I've got these daughters and I have to be there for them. And I said, you can do that here, and I will make sure that you can. And I will check and make sure that, we're living up to what commitment that I made to you.
Right.
And we did. And I watched her daughters grow up. And I think part of what I want to say about the importance of Shine is that it just feels better to work in an environment where people want to see you win, want to see you thrive, want to figure out how they can help you, and where you want to figure out how you can help them. And so it's a healthier environment, and I think people work harder, they do better, because people are coaching them and looking out for them, and then ultimately that inures to the benefit of the enterprise.
So I read somewhere that there were these dinners that you threw for the women in the Obama administration at the White House, where you focused and talked about explicitly amplifying each other's voices. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Well, it started this way. If you'll remember, when President Obama first took office, the world was falling apart. The economy was in a free fall. Our banks were on the verge of collapse. Our automobile industry was literally in bankruptcy. We had 2 wars, a lot going on. And everybody came in, and he was trying to get the best players on the field, and we were all working really hard. But what I began to notice, because it was a very intense period and there's a lot of testosterone flowing around, is that the women were beginning to shrink. And if you had to get your idea, you had to really push your idea in. And they got tired of having to fight their way, and it's totally exhausting.
Yeah, right.
And so I started to notice that they really weren't talking as much in meetings. And I knew they had a lot to say because I'd had a lot to do with helping select them. So I knew we had the best and the brightest.
Right.
And so I said to President Obama, watch and see these meetings. The women aren't talking as much as they did in the beginning. They're shying away. And he said, well, that's unacceptable. Their job is to talk. And so I said, well, there's some issues. And so he said, well, I want them to come over and have dinner with me. In my home, and we're going to talk about it. So then I went to each of the women and I said, you better go in there and be honest. You better tell them what the issues are. Why are you holding back? What are you concerned about? And so we had a very frank and open dinner. And everybody kind of explained to him their perspective. And he said, look, I have your back. And when I'm not there, Valerie has your back. So at the end of this dinner, I want you all to commit that you're going to have regular dinners with Valerie.
Oh, wow.
You're going to talk about the issues that are troubling you. If you feel as though someone's holding you back, you're going to confide in her, and you're going to confide in each other. And then she'll let me know if you need to have another dinner with me.
Wow.
And so he really kicked it off.
Yeah.
And so we started having these dinners. They started out monthly, I think.
Wow.
And it got to be a joke because at the end of each dinner, I would go, well, do we need to go back and see the president? Like, no, we're fine. We're fine because we had built our own community.
Yeah.
And we shared not just work issues, but our children and our hopes and our dreams and our anxieties and what guys were getting on our nerves. And it was really a sense of community. And we shone on each other because we cared about each other.
That's amazing.
And I think that's such an important part of what you're trying to do is that you can't just shine in a vacuum. You have to shine because you care.
That's right.
And you're really rooting for somebody. And then that makes work a lot more rewarding.
That's such a neat story. So President Obama is kind of a co-founder of this as well.
He's a co-founder. I got to give credit where credit is due. He started
amazing.
it.
That's amazing.
He did.
So tell me about, you come out of these dinners, you're holding them monthly, you're building community, you're shining each other. How did that translate to the boardroom or to the conference room where you were doing the actual work?
Well, I think, remember that several of us worked on the campaign together, and so we had been through the trenches, but none of the senior women in the White House had had a position on the campaign. So in a sense, they were newcomers to the table. And by us getting to know each other, you walked in a meeting and you didn't feel like a stranger. You felt like, oh, well, I know those women, and I know that they're looking out for me. And I think there's safety in numbers. And one thing President Obama did do is ensure that, as I said, he had diversity. And we had over half of our department heads were run by women.
Wow.
Which is unprecedented in any White House. So
Right.
women were in key positions of
In
power.
any tech company too, by the way.
And just about any company,
right.
period.
Right.
And I'm proud to say the highest position is assistant to the president.
Okay.
And in the end, when we left, every single woman who had that position, other than me, who started out there, was promoted while we were in the White House.
Oh, wow.
So not only did he recruit women, but he moved them up in the organization.
That's amazing.
And I think in large part it happened because we got to know one another, we began to trust one another, and we walked in meetings with a little bit more oomph behind us because we knew people at that table had our back. So we didn't have like a etched in stone strategy, but another thing we did do is that we at times practiced with one another.
Okay.
And so I can remember going in Tina Chin's office and saying, well, this is my issue. How do you feel about it? And I want to present it this way. What do you think? And she would do the same thing with me. And I remember one time Cecilia Munoz was having a hard time making a point that she really felt needed to be heard. And she said, you know, what am I saying wrong? Let me practice and figure out how we can do this together. And then when you go in a meeting and you know what somebody's going to say, it's a lot easier for you to say, yeah, I agree with that.
Right,
and
right.
Yeah, and so you pile on, and there's safety in piling on too.
That's amazing. Amazing story. So I had read bits and pieces of this, and as I was transitioning my role as an entrepreneur into an investor, I was entering a new community of women. There's only 7% female general partners at venture funds right now, globally. And so I knew this was a new community, and I knew a few people, Ann Miraco, who's a mentor and friend of mine, and some others. But I also knew that I wanted to enter this new community of women and create a bond, create this community, and really Shine Theory played a big role. So I had read about it. I held my own dinner. I didn't know that the origin story actually started with a dinner, which is kind of neat. And I got a group of 18 women around the table, all venture investors, and I said, listen, I'm new here. but I want to make a promise that I'm going to shine on you. I hope that we can shine on each other. And we just had a fabulous time.
What was the reaction to that?
It was...
Did they know going in what your objective of was for the dinner?
No, they didn't. I held the dinner as sort of a way to celebrate going into the venture industry. And so my partner, Chris Howard at Fuel Capital said, oh, you're joining Fuel, we should have an announcement or have a party or something. I said, you know what I really want to do? I just want to get a small group of women together who I really admire, who I really look up to, and talk about what it's going to be like entering this new community. It was so positive and so inspiring, and we made promises that night that we would shine on each other and amplify each other's voices as we win deals and as we look at investing in female founders. And so it really has this broad impact. How do you think Shine Theory can scale beyond what you saw at the White House and be applied to other industries, other communities, other things?
I think it works everywhere, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be in business or in politics. It should be everywhere. It should be in our own families. We should shine on each other starting at home. It should be our friends. I mean, I have friends who have been my friends for as long as I can remember, and they've been there through the good times, but more importantly, the bad times. And they're not fair weather friends, and they're not friends who just want to come when you're down either.
Right.
They're just there, steady as a rock all the time. And I think it all gets back to relationships. And whether you're at home or at work or at play, you are going to be healthier and more productive if you feel that people are rooting for you. If you feel that they're lifting you up, you will rise.
What role do you think men can play in this movement?
I think men have a very important role to play, because I think they're just beginning to understand what women bring to the table.
Right.
And I think that the more enlightened business leaders have figured out, you know what, I make better decisions when I'm not just talking to people who think just like I do, when there's some diversity of perspective and opinion at the table. But they need help trying to figure out, okay, well, I know I want you here, but what can I do to ensure that you thrive? And so when they shine on women, particularly in a male-dominated environment, and you're at the top, because tone starts at the top. And so if the men at the top are shining on the women, the other men are going to watch and go, well, wait a minute. And then that's what builds culture. It's not just having the right policies on the books. It's making sure that the people who are at the top actually believe in it and demonstrate it, and people will model good behavior.
So Valerie, you're a co-founder of the United State of Women.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, certainly. So in the summer of 2016, Tina Chin and I, who had been running the White House Council on Women and Girls for 8 years, decided it would be a good opportunity to really galvanize people from around the country who had been working on gender equity and showcase best practices in the hopes that people would copy and imitate and take them to scale.
Wow.
And so we had a conference with 5,000 people who came from all over. Who knows how many people were watching online. And we talked about everything from healthcare to ending sexual assault on college campuses, to women entrepreneurship, to how you can shine on one another and support one another and build a culture. We talked about the 21st century workplace that has to reflect the values of the 21st century worker, which covers everything from equal pay to paid leave to paid sick days to workplace flexibility, so important for working parents, affordable childcare, making sure that you are earning a living wage, all of the issues that working families struggle with and that employers need to be sensitive to. And so it was such a success. And then we thought, after we left the White House, we took a step back and we said, you know, now this next chapter of our life, we are really our own bosses. We get to decide what to do and how to spend our time. And so I had to do some soul searching, and I said, well, what do I really care about? And what I really care about is gender equity. And so Tina and I thought, well, the United State of Women name is there. It now has a brand associated with a very successful conference. Why don't we continue this work and move around the country again and have sessions? And so I've been to Chicago and Atlanta, we've been to LA and San Francisco, and Tina's been to Columbus. We've been really going around the country trying to encourage women to share these best practices. Why would we reinvent the wheel when we know what works?
Right.
We just need to take it to scale. And so coming up, May 5th and 6th, we're going to have a conference in Los Angeles. And we're going to invite many of the same people, but many new people too. And we're focusing a lot on not just the people who are household names, but who are the people on the ground, really working to make a difference in the lives of women and girls. And so we're going to celebrate the successes, but really challenge one another to say, well, what more can we do to bring gender equity to the United States, but also around the world?
That's amazing. I mean, what really resonates with me is how accessible and how inclusive that initiative is. And there's so much to celebrate. There's so many positive things happening for women. And it doesn't have to be about starting companies and running for office, and all of those things are amazing too, right? But sometimes it's shining on the women that, you know, are working through everyday live things, and I think that's so important.
And the people on the ground. I mean, one of the people who I like to shine on is Jordan Brooks, who is the executive director of the United States of Women, and she started out as Tina's assistant in the White House, and she showed that she really cared about gender equity, and she kept asking for more and more responsibility. And so we made her the deputy head of the White House Council on Women and Girls, and then when we left the White House, she said, I'm ready to step up and do this full time and to really lead this effort. And I'm so proud of her. And when we go and do events together, Jordan will often say, well, Valerie, you do the speaking. And I go, no, you do the speaking.
Yeah, right.
Let me be your backup person, and let's shine on you. And I sit and I watch her speak, and she used to be nervous, and now she's confident. It's practice. Yeah. It's practice, but what it means is that the older generation also has to take a step back and let somebody else shine. They can't shine if you're, you know, providing shade on top of them.
Providing that support and that amplification.
Amplify.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And that's one of our words. Galvanize support, amplify what's working, and bring real focus and attention to this issue that affects everyone. These are no longer issues that you can just say they're women's issues.
That's right.
These are family issues, they're business issues, they're economic issues for our country and the world. And President Obama's mom used to often say you can tell a lot about a country by how well the women in the country are doing. And I think we have every reason to encourage that the women here can do better. And men are a part of that equation.
That's right.
But we also can do a lot for one another.
You know, when I think about this moment in time and this moment in history, it feels like we're at a very pinnacle, important moment.
What better time to be alive than right now? And you think about the impact that technology has on our ability to bring people together, to galvanize. I mean, movements like the Me Too movement, I'm not sure it could have happened without technology.
That's right.
Because there is safety in numbers. And when one person feels that they're the only voice, they feel isolated. Just as perhaps women feel around a conference table when there are all men, you can also feel isolated when you bring up something that's as deeply personal and painful as sexual assault. And so knowing that there are a bunch of women shining on you lifts you up and allows you to be brave, because it takes a lot of bravery. And the flip side of the technology is that the attacks come fast and furious as well, right? And so you can arm yourself better for that if you know you have a community of people who are shining on you.
That's right, that's right. Thank you so much, Valerie, for being here today.
My pleasure.
Thank you for sharing your story, your generosity, your inspiration, helping us all amplify our voices.
Absolutely.
And helping us to shine together. Thank you.
Well, I couldn't do it without your support, so thank you too.